Killers at the gate? Let's play hardball. Good evening, I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. Let me start with this gruesome killing of 150 Syrian soldiers. The killers of ISIL had those soldiers stripped down to their underwear, then trooped them through the desert barefoot, then executed the lot of them. These are soldiers, mind you, men enlisted into the country's army, taunted, then executed by the terrorist force now controlling much of Syria and Iraq, a group that beheads and ceremoniously crucifies those who fall into its hands. Its barbarity serves both its terrorist aims and the bloodlust of its members, including an increasing number of recruits who join ISIS for the hatred it embodies, the opportunity to kill which it offers. And today, the Prime Minister of Britain said that it's taking its killing spree westward.
This is not some foreign conflict thousands of miles from home that we can hope to ignore. The ambition to create an extremist caliphate in the heart of Iraq and Syria is a threat to our own security here in the UK.
Evan Coleman's an NBC terrorism analyst and Michael O'Hanlon's director of research at the Brookings Institution. As I mentioned yesterday, ISIS released a propaganda video showing what appears to be the massacre of well over 100 Syrian soldiers. There they are. The men are humiliated first, stripped down to their underwear, and forced to march in the desert while being taunted by the ISIS fighters. Later in the video, bloody bodies are seen piled up in the desert. Well, today, there was another horrific video, you see it right now, released by ISIS, showing captured Kurdish soldiers in orange jumpsuits, and one of the soldiers is later beheaded. You see, well, you see the setup to that. Let me go to Evan Coleman now. This is what we're up against. Is it regional, or does it have a global reach?
It has a global reach. I mean, look, in this latest video where they beheaded this Kurd, there was actually a message issued directly to Barack Obama saying, we're coming for you, we're going to kill your soldiers, etc. This has been the consistent message. I mean, it's difficult to understand that people don't see what a threat that ISIS represents, because ISIS has been very open about this for a long period of time. 2 years ago, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi openly threatened that he would launch terrorist attacks inside the U.S. homeland. So, look, we could choose not to believe him, but as far as ISIS is concerned, the U.S. is its adversary. It's looking to carry out terrorist attacks in European and Western countries, including the U.S., and it believes it can do that if it recruits a sufficient number of Western operatives. In other words, individuals who speak English, who are carrying British and American passports. And if you look at the numbers, 500 to 600 British nationals in Syria or have traveled to Syria, 900 French nationals have potentially traveled to Syria, 100 American nationals. These are numbers that dwarf anything we've ever seen before in Afghanistan, in Yemen, in any other conflict that al-Qaeda or a jihadi group that has threatened the U.S. has established a base. We've never seen these kind of numbers before.
Michael, an open invitation to war. If ISIS, the State of Islam, pulls a number in the United States involving the deaths of a dozen people or 10 dozen or whatever, in doing it in name, as they clearly intend to do, don't they invite us, in fact, make it irresistible for our armed forces to go in there under the president's direction and kill tens of thousands of them? Don't they know that's coming? And it's easy to do it morally and easy to do it politically, because once they strike us, there ain't going to be any more debating in our country about what to do with this band of killers.
I think that's right.
We'll kill them.
And so you could read that either way. You could say that there is a chance they'll show restraint if we show restraint. But I agree with Evan. I think that they are already a big threat, that the weight of evidence suggests they're coming for us already, and they're certainly coming for our regional allies. If there was any doubt about that, their attempted march into Kurdistan a few weeks ago showed they're not just trying to unify the Levant, the Arabs, the Sunni Arabs of the region immediately contiguous to where they already are. They're trying to expand, and the whole notion of a caliphate is to rule wherever Muslims have been in power before. That's going to mean that Jordan's going to be in their crosshairs if they get a chance, other parts of Iraq, certainly Saudi Arabia if they ever had the chance. This is a very ambitious group. I'm not suggesting they're going to be successful, but it's up to us, I think, to help our regional allies make sure they aren't.
Well, the good news about that is if they're going to do that, then those countries know they're going to do that. Are they going to do something to them first? Will we be able to recruit, implicitly at least, recruit a coalition against them, of their neighbors?
I think that we will. I think we will. I think the Kurds are already on our side. We saw that in the Mosul Dam. The Jordanians have to worry first and foremost about hunkering down, taking care of their own territory. And, of course, there are all the refugees that have spilled onto their territory from Syria already, so I'm not sure they can help us out a lot. But it's certainly Kurds. And I think ultimately the Iraqi army has to be our #1 ally here. They've got to get ready to do their own surge, Chris. I'm not proposing, even though I supported the surge 7 years ago, I'm not supporting that we should ever contemplate that kind of a notion now ourselves. But we have to help them empower themselves, reconstitute their own forces to go on the offensive and do their own surge ultimately in the Sunni Arab parts of Iraq.
Evan, do we have the firepower among those various factions, the Kurds, the Jordanians, the Iraqi, or the army itself? Do we have enough firepower in there to overwhelm ISIS, even if ISIS enjoys this sort of morale advantage in the sense that they want to kill and kill and kill, whereas the other countries are simply trying to defend their lives?
The only way we can really defeat ISIS is by convincing Sunni Iraqis and Sunni Syrians that they do not have a common cause with this group. We have to convince Sunni insurgent groups and Syrian rebel groups to start actively fighting against ISIS and disparage ISIS and get rid of ISIS. The problem is that we've been talking about that now for over a year. We've been talking about trying to empower the Iraqi army, trying to empower the Sunni community. None of this is working. Whatever we're doing, it's not working. At a certain point, we're going to have to consider what happens if we can't do this. Do we go it alone? Do we not do anything at all? And I think the problem is that right now we're waffling. We're not doing anything.
Well, what was the president doing yesterday in that press conference? He seemed to be muting the talk that he was going to announce an attack. A lot of us thought he was going to announce an attack yesterday afternoon. So what was he trying to do besides say to Dempsey and the rest, cool it, we're not fighting for the homeland yet, cool it. But when he said, I don't have a strategy, do you mean he doesn't have a way of getting these countries to do what we'd like them to do in attacking ISIS? Yeah,
look, politically speaking, I understand that attacking Syria is not exactly the #1 most popular thing in the American public. And I understand the whole idea of trying to wrestle together a regional or international coalition to take action here is not going to be easy, especially when you have countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar that are actually providing money and weapons to groups like Jabhat al-Nusra, which is al-Qaeda's official branch in Syria. How do you organize all those forces together? I appreciate this is not easy for the president, and I appreciate that philosophically he's opposed to trying to get back into the quagmire of Iraq. But I think we do have to ask at a certain point, it's been a year. We talked about launching airstrikes in Syria a year ago. We still don't have a strategy. We still don't know what to do about ISIS. At a certain point, we may have to take action on our own.
You're conflating here. You're talking about airstrikes. Those airstrikes we talked about a year ago in Syria were aimed at Assad.
Well, not all of them. We were also talking about back then as well about potentially targeting Jabhat al-Nusra, al-Qaeda in Syria, with the understanding that Assad was only part of the problem. Jabhat al-Nusra carrying out suicide bombings against civilian areas was another part of the problem. So again, I don't accept the idea that we don't have a strategy. I don't even think that's realistic. I think we do have as part of a strategy. The problem is the strategy right now is limited to military options. And I think the president appears to be very reticent to use military options right now in Syria in the absence of some other method, political means of pushing Sunnis towards fighting alongside us or pushing regional actors to stop supporting Jabhat al-Nusra. I just don't know if we're going to be able to achieve that. And the question is, what do we do if we can't? Do we just sit here on our hands and do nothing? I don't think that's an answer.
Okay, well, here's the question I want to get back to Mike with. Maybe you know the answer. What was the president's hesitancy about yesterday? He called a press conference many of us, I thought, was going to be announcing airstrikes within Syria. And then he announced, look, we're getting the cart before the horse here, and use some other metaphors to say basically we're ahead on our skis. He uses all these metaphors, but clearly he was trying to pull back somebody, whether it's Dempsey or Chuck Hagel or somebody in the administration, was talking about us attacking, and he didn't want to attack. What was going on inside, do you think?
It's a great question. And by the way, I think he should have given himself a wee bit more credit for his Iraq strategy. Maybe Evan and I have a slight disagreement here, but I think the last few months of Iraq strategy have been moving in the right direction because we now have a body as the prime minister designate. You need a political consensus and a government of national unity to get the Iraqi army to obey their commander-in-chief. So that part I'm happy with so far. I think we'll have to use more military tools in Iraq than we've been willing to acknowledge yet, but nonetheless the political strategy piece was good. On Syria and what the president said yesterday, getting to your question, you know, if the president's just trying to rein in Hagel and Dempsey, doing it on live national TV is a pretty funny way to do it, especially when they work for him. And it doesn't make him look very good to, you know, go public with internal debates. So I tend to think of it, I like to want to believe it as sort of a moment of brutal honesty, recognizing that his Syria policy so far hasn't worked and he's in need of a new one. That's what I want to hope. But that's the best interpretation I can give to it.
I think that's a very lenient interpretation. I want to ask both of you a simple question, starting with Evan. If we told the Iraqi government that's now constituted, I know it's Shia dominated, take all the Air Force efforts, all the Air Force equipment you've got right now, put every fighter plane or bomber plane in the air, hit ISIS everywhere you can. Right now, we'll give you all the gas and spare parts you need. We'll back you up. We'll replace your equipment if you lose planes. But we want you to go on the attack. Evan first, and then Michael. Would it have success?
Actually, it might have the reverse of success. There's every reason to believe the Iraqi Air Force would bomb the wrong people. They have very little intelligence, and frankly, they're sectarian. They might end up bombing Sunni insurgent factions that have nothing to do with ISIS, that we need to actually go against ISIS. I don't have any faith in the Iraqi military whatsoever. It's a good thing that al-Maliki is gone, but we haven't seen any turnaround in the Iraqi military. They're still losing ground, even with our airstrikes.
So 11 years has given us kaput. Nothing.
In my view, it's given us very, very little if you look at what's going on right now.
Michael, your assessment. Could Iraq, if we gave them everything, if we backed them up like Lend-Lease in World War II with everything we had, could they knock out or give a knock-down punch at least to ISIS?
Not without their army performing well on the ground. We had more air power in Iraq in the surge and the period before the surge than the Iraqis are ever going to have in the foreseeable future, and we couldn't do it with air power and drones. They're certainly not going to be able to, partly for the reasons that Evan mentions, but also because this is inherently an undoable proposition from the air, especially in the cities that ISIS already controls. The only way to root them out in places where they are already rooted in is to use ground forces, to go in and do a surge, to police neighborhoods, to get intelligence sources from people that you then protect, to raid depots, to go after leadership targets that may be transitory. You've got to do that with an army that believes in the mission. And right now, I agree with Evan, the Iraqi army may not. They have not in recent months. We're going to have to hope that a body can rebuild their confidence and their support. It's going to take quite a bit of doing.
I guess this explains why the president said he doesn't have a strategy yet. And I think you've been very well, both of you guys have been pretty lenient on him. Thank you so much, Evan Coleman, and thank you, Michael Hannon. We'll find out on Monday where it stands. Up next, the president's making it clear we're not on the verge of a new war in Syria. Critics are knocking his wording yesterday, but his intent was to dial back some of that rhetoric coming from the people in his own administration. That's the way I read it. Plus, that smelly Burger King deal this week to move its headquarters over the border in order to enjoy a much lower tax base up in Canada. Is this just the tip of the iceberg? And other big businesses are doing the same darn thing. Can Washington do anything about it? These guys are leaving the country to sell here and not pay taxes here. Also, a veteran producer on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno gives us an insider's account of Leno's 22-year late-night reign inside. Everything from Hugh Grant's apology for you-know-what to interviewing me. And finally, there was something about the president's press conference yesterday that got some people talking. It's not what he said, it's what he showed up in. And that's in the sideshow, where it belongs. And this is Hardball, the place for politics.